The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Create Forms Whilst Working from Home. We're pleased to have so many of you joining us today. As we all know, working from home has become the norm due to the pandemic. But sometimes it can be hard to manage things in a legal practice that are more paper-based. Luckily, Quill makes it easy to submit legal forms online through integrations with FormEvo. As a reminder, this is an add-on service that you can purchase. I see some of you here already have forms, and so this webinar will be a great reminder of how Forms works. For others, you can easily get the service for only £10 per active user per month. Today, I'm joined by Archie and Paul from FormEvo. Welcome both. In terms of housekeeping, you're welcome to ask us questions live, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the next 45 minutes. This webinar is also recorded, and you will receive the recording automatically today. So we're going to address this afternoon, we're going to provide you with an overview of how Forms works in Quill, how easy it is to get started, and we'll also be covering how to complete forms. You can see on the screen some of the individual forms that we will be looking at. We'll show you how to share these with your colleagues and then save the forms to Quill. Along the way, we'll also share best practice and common mistakes we see that you should avoid. I'll now hand you over to Paul.
Thank you, Becky. I'm just waiting for me to have access to share my screen. Here it comes. There we go. Excellent stuff. Let me move into Quill Forms. So, good afternoon, everybody, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. So, what I wanted to do just before I start is just talk about a couple of the key concepts of working from home that we look to support you with. The first is going to be around access, which is obviously going to be very important for people working remotely from the office. I'll talk about sharing, which has become much more important with the advent of virtual meetings. Team working, obviously you're working from home, you can feel a little bit isolated. We can support you in team working with your colleagues, and also from a management perspective, how do you support your staff when they need guidance? I'll also talk about the unexpected. Obviously, over the last year, we've had enough of the unexpected, but it continues to come our way, so we'll deal with that. We've had a couple of requests around specific forms, so I want to look at those, TR1 being one, and inheritance tax being another. And finally, I'll finish with when you do need help, you need it now, and how can we help you with it, and appropriate training. So let me start the presentation, and as you can see, I'm in interactive and I'm in the section called documents. When I go to documents, what I can see is my forms and the forms library. Now what you have access to are around 2,000 forms, combination of electronic forms where the output is a PDF with a wet ink signature, but also the developing digital forms where you submit the data to the relevant agency and the output is certification back from that agency. You'll also see a difference when we go through the forms in that traditionally forms have been more of a monologue where you enter the data and you produce a form. What you're going to see today is much more of a dialogue. And that, what I mean by a dialogue is engagement with different people. You're going to engage with your clients, with your colleagues, and with government agencies, and data will flow backwards and forwards. At the moment, you can see two sections for forms. My forms, which is basically where any forms that you've started to use and are in draft would be available from within interactive, and the forms library. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start the journey with new forms, and then we'll get to a section where I shall pass back to Becky to talk about the saving of the forms. So in Forms Library, what I've got here is the library itself in terms of various practice areas, and I can click onto an area and start to access the forms within it. But I've also got a search facility, so I'm going to search for the aforementioned TR1 because people were asking about it. So for the person who was asking, do we have access to land registry forms? The answer is obviously yes now. And secondly, you can see you do have an option if you so wish to have the data merging from your interactive system. So I select a case, in my case it's a fairly limited choice of 2, and I can now open my form. Now the form is very much as you've seen many times before, so let me talk about some things that are a little bit different. On the second page, you've got the ability at this section, and indeed this can be added into multiple areas within multiple forms. You've got the ability here to add particular clauses in once, and then you can reuse them as you move forward. So I can go to my organization or personal, select a particular clause that I've already used once before, and it's there immediately in the form. I don't need to keep rekeying data all of the time. On the next page, we've created for you various attestation clauses, and I can simply select the clause that I want. And now with land registry forms, you have the ability to convert into Word documents if you so wish. And here is my Word document. And obviously I've now got the functionality of Word, but if I scroll through the form, what you'll see is the clause that we inserted has been added to this form, and indeed the attestation clause on the end. If you need more than one attestation clause, very easy to add. And you've now got all the functionality of Word available to you. Let's talk about the concept of sharing. Obviously these days people are not able to have physical face-to-face meetings, or not currently, and we've looked to design processes to support that. Probably the most used shared forms are going to be the TA forms, because for the majority of the form, the completion process is going to sit with the client. So we have here a header sheet, and from the header sheet, what I can then do, that's got as auto-populated with data, and then when I select TA forms, they too will now be auto-populated. So I can add forms on the fly, and you can see it's populating them. How do you share? Okay, first thing to point out is this. This is our bookmarking system, and there are 2 purposes. The first is this is an easy navigation tool. Once you're into a form, instead of having to guess where you need to go by the page numbers and going backwards and forwards, I know precisely where I'm going because I can click here, and it will take me to the section on light fittings. So it just makes the job easier, especially for the client themselves. The second function is you can see it's color coded. And what this means is green sections have been completed, white sections we've not started, and amber, we've at least started the process. Now, if I was sharing this form with the client, what I would be saying to them as part of the instructions is please complete the form. As you work your way through the form, click section completed, and only say you're finished once all of these areas are green. So we're trying to assist them in ensuring they don't miss out pages. To share the form, click on the Share Evo Vault, and I can either share one form within this group or the entire bundle. So it keeps it efficient for you. And I've got various choices. I can share the form, the client can review and add comments, or on top of that, they can actually edit the form. And indeed, you have a third choice, which is to provide the ability for the form to be e-signed, and it can be e-signed once they've completed the form, or you can select a second option, which allows you to review the form first prior to signature. So to share a form, simply type in here the name of the client. The system will research the database and identify the client. I can add notes. So these could be my guidance notes that I want the client to see, or anything else I want to cover off. And I can also share, as well as forms, any other associated documents you want this client to see. And I'll show you a little bit more when we go into an example from the client side. So I'll close that down rather than sending it for real. But what I will do is I want to just go over here, and this is what the client would open up from the link that is sent to them. Now, 2 points. When the link is sent to the client in an email, this is badged and customized with your own logos and names so that the client feels confident that this is coming from you. And when they come to this screen, this too has your logo and name. So I'll now log into the Vault, and I need to access this system. I need to have a code which is sent to my phone. This is called two-factor authentication. So commonly used when accessing bank accounts. So I've added my code that's been sent through. So you can see we've built in security for you, and I'm into the form. Here is the sample form that I want the client to review. And in this instance, here are the notes that I have personally written to assist this client. You can see at the top, they can see who it's from. And then below that, they can actually see the forms that they need to start filling in. And it's just a case of clicking onto the form, and they see what you see before, so they can fill in. As they tick, this will turn green. If they want to talk to you, they can create comments here by adding comments, and you build up a kind of WhatsApp chat facility in the background of the form. Now, as well as forms, I said before that we can cover off documents. So I'm back at the kind of opening screen for the Vault sharing service, and I'll move to documents. Here you can see different types of documents that the client can now look at, read, and review. But also the client can upload any other documents. The aim of the game here is all around security and risk management. And so what we're looking to do is to give you that opportunity to share forms and documents in a secure manner without the need to attach as an email. So I'm going to log out of here, and I'm going to go back into the forms module. But just before I move on, and when I set up the next part of the demonstration, I'm just going to ask my colleague Archie just to talk a little bit about e-signature itself, and also the TA forms and where we're heading. Sounds a little bit like Archie is on mute. So I'm going to carry on with my section, and then we'll cover this later. Oh, there he is.
There we go. Yeah, sorry, the unmute took a while to come through. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Becky. So just a quick insight really into the roadmap. TA6 is going to change. Quite when, we don't know. I am on the Law Society and the Land Registry's committees around various subjects in conveyancing in particular. One of those for the Law Society that we have also brokered a meeting with the Land Registry over is over the TA6 Part 1. This is the equivalent or the evolution really of something that you may have already heard of called the BAPSI, or in the old days, I suppose it was a home information pack. And in effect, it's being resurrected and evolving, mostly due to the pandemic. And the technology has moved on sufficiently to make these things more reasonable and more available. The TA Part 6, the TA6 Part 1 will be have elements of it, roughly 35 to 45% of it, that is used in a TA6, a conventional TA6. And the idea is that there will be digital data and there will be a dialogue. And whilst it might sit with the estate agent in the first instance, it will be filled in by the consumer, and that data will be available to pass between the estate agent and the conveyancer, and also pre-populate part of the formal current TA6. So that's something that's very much being evolved right now. And it's basically building on the concept of working from home and the new normal. Another element, reference the TR1 that Paul's already done a quick demonstration on. That, as Paul has already pointed out, is a paper form. It comes as a PDF. That form is evolving into a digital form. So the digital deed will happen within 2021, and a prerequisite in legislation around a digital deed is that there is a digital signature. That is not an electronic signature, it's a digital signature. It's known as a qualified electronic signature, and we're expecting that to be released as a specification and then available for effectively a TR1. So you might be presented with a TR1, but in the background, you'll actually be doing a digital deed and a digital TR1. And qualified electronic signatures are expected in autumn 2021. As I'm involved in the stakeholders committee with the land industry on that design and on that delivery and how digital deeds and digital signatures will be delivered. All of the forms within Quill forms where a digital signature is allowed, and remember, digital signature is one that does not require a witness, so it completely removes the need for a witness. Those forms will, as time goes on, be available in Quill forms, so you will have access to either a TR1 as a PDF or a TR1 as a digital form. So these are things to look out for in the coming months, and as we hit the autumn of this year, you'll actually see some deliverables on those fronts. So that's Quill forms and interactive, giving you a window to the future of where the digitization is going, and it's come from the net result of the pandemic. And that's why working from home and working more flexibly and working via nothing more than a browser is something that I'm sure you all appreciate is valuable. So I think really that's given you a little eye-opening to the roadmap of what's involved, and I'll hand back.
Okay, thanks, Archie. I wanted to talk about the concept of team working on forms remotely. So there are a couple of ways of doing that. If you decide to save the form back into Quill, then obviously you can, different people can access the form there. But where it's in draft, we see the forms residing within Quill forms as opposed to interactive. And so what that means is that I, as a user, if I'm sharing access to the completion process with somebody else, can be in existing forms. I then clicked on the search, and I've got the ability now to search for a specific form that I want to carry on the completion process on by the client file reference. Every form has a client file reference automatically added, and you can see here examples: Monday demo 123, Devo, etc. So if you do need to share a form for someone else to complete or to basically look out in an informal process, that's how you can do it. We can also manage the unexpected of COVID in terms of someone unexpectedly becoming ill. If that was the case, then other users can go into the produced by section, select the individual who is ill, and we can do a search for all of their forms. So we can quickly establish control, and we don't have a crisis on our hands. So short term, that's how you could access the forms. If someone was going to be off for a longer period of time, then via the settings function, it's very easy to reassign these forms to somebody else within the firm themselves. Okay, the next thing I wanted to look at is I'm going to go back to my forms produced by me, and we had a question around inheritance tax forms. And I'm going to use this, first of all, to demonstrate inheritance tax, but secondly, just show you how we can support from a compliance and security angle. So first of all, let's just talk about the form itself. What we've done here is we've created the ability for you to, first of all, have integrated data from interactive, but then as you work your way through an IHT 400, you can simply select on the fly other supplementary forms that you need to complete as part of the process. The system will then open the form on the fly. So let's just show you this in action. So I click here, and I'm going to add a 422. and you'll see that this form has already started to have data completed within it. The system has got the ability to auto-populate and to auto-calculate. Now, it's also very practical in that if once I'm into my 422, I suddenly realize the name is spelt wrong throughout this form, do not panic. Change the form once. Here, every other area where that particular word is will be changed. To give you another example using the supplementaries, here's a 406 that I've done earlier. And again, you've got auto-population. The data here has come from me in terms of the figures. The form has calculated the total. Now, if you've got an instance with supplementaries where you need an extra copy of the same supplementary, this is all you need to do. So here is a second 406, and again, auto-population, and we've got the calculations being done within the separate form. So I've got two forms, but actually the summation of the two forms is what is needed in box 52. And if I come out of this form and navigate back to the 400, I know it's on page 7. So let's go to page 7. And what you'll see when we get there is it's taken the two forms, added them together to give you the auto-populated figure you see there. Other things that you can do is you've got the ability with the 405 to have the choice. I can either auto-populate or not from the 405. And these have been put in place at the request of practitioners who are already users. For those who feel there will be a need to manually add data into the form, then what you could do is use all of the auto-population and auto-calculation, and then once you feel satisfied you've used that, simply go to auto-calculations, turn them off, and I can now manually intervene in this particular form. So very easy, and will save you around 75% of the time. Note also the bookmarking system here so that you can navigate on the fly through multiple forms. If I close this one down, you'll see the group in its entirety, and then I can navigate within by clicking on the plus, and I can move around that way. Secondly, of course, you've got the green, amber, and white traffic light to aid and ensure that you've missed nothing. Let me return onto the compliance issue, and if I go to the bottom right of any form, if someone needed to check the touch points in terms of was this form changed by a particular individual, who's looked at it, when did they look, how often, was it shared with the client, all of those kind of things can be easily checked via the audit trail. So here's an example here where you can see this particular user has gone in, and you can spot things like they did turn the calculations off. So you've got to bear that in mind when you're reviewing the data that's within the form. Everything is captured automatically. So let's close this down. And I also wanted to talk about the management perspective and digital forms. So I've created and filled in a digital form just to show you what that looks like. So here is a Companies House MR01. So just talking about digital forms and some of the benefits of this. The first is the fact that this form allows me to submit this data just now to Companies House. You've got a 21-day deadline, and often using the paper process, it gets pretty tight in terms of time. Using this application, you should be able to have the data and have everything completed within 48 hours. Now, I talked before about monologue within traditional forms and dialogue within Quill forms. And here's an example. As I'm working my way through the form, I've put the company number in, and I've immediately got the ability to engage and have a dialogue with Companies House and pick up on the charges. Secondly, we can do some risk management work here. When putting in the name of the firm, you've got limited, LTD, as well as the full spelling of the word, but you need to have the same one that they have residing at Companies House. So again, engage with Companies House, have that dialogue, and I can see, yes, it's an LTD, not a LIMITD. So I can continue filling in the form, and then I've got the option now to submit this form. But what we could do for you is, if you want to have management control, we could have a button here that said peer review. This would allow me to click on the button. This form would be shared with my manager. He can review and he can approve or he can reject. And then that information comes back to me within the workflow of the system, and I'm good to go. So it just gives you that ability to have extra control as you work your way through the application. A couple of things from me just to finish off. Obviously, when people are working from home, they can feel a little bit isolated in working on forms, and they may need some immediate help. So the system has got that ability. As I'm working my way through a form, if I think, right, I do actually want to share a form, but I've forgotten how to do it, what do? All you do is go to the question mark next to a specific piece of functionality, and you're good to go. Here are the notes on this particular piece of functionality. Secondly, our support team is an experienced support team with over 30 years experience, and you have got access to them. Because this has been designed for home working, the support person can actually ask you for the ID of the form, i.e. this number here, and they can share their screen with you, and they can show you how to resolve your problem immediately. It is not the case that you have to ask lots of questions on an online portal before you have access to people. They're available straight away. Finally, from a training perspective, we will provide customized training for your practice, and we will record the training so that if people need to look at it again, then they will have that ability. Also, between ourselves and Quill, we are looking at further online video training guides, which are in the short to medium term roadmap. So watch out for those. So that was everything I wanted to cover. I now want to hand back to Becky.
Thank you, Paul. So Paul has shown us today how to use the forms within the application itself. I'm now going to show you all how you would be able to save the forms to the matters profile, so the clients themselves. So you should be able to see my screen shortly.
Yep, it's there, Becky.
Brilliant. So you can see my screen now. I am on the client matter. Now, what I would like to do is to review the forms I've recently worked with for this client. So I'm just going to select Documents, Forms. And now here I can see all the recent forms that I've worked on for this client. I can see the forms ID, the name of the form, the status of the form, and I can also see the option to view the form. Now, just to the right-hand side of that, you've got the download PDF, which will allow you to download the form and review the form in the PDF format. And then you've also got the option to save to case file. So when I select this, a pop-up is going to come up to allow us to save this to the case file. Now you can add the subfolder you'd like to save in, choose the folder, any labels you'd like to add to associate to the form in this drop down, any notes you'd like to allow to add to the forms, and then if you do subscribe to DocSub alongside forms as well, you'll be able to maybe record time against that. So I'll select upload documents now, and that form has been saved against that client. When you select Docs and My Forms, again, you'll be able to see a list of forms that have also been worked on. Now, the difference between looking at the forms by matter and looking at it this way is that when you look at the matter, you will only see forms associating to that matter. However, when we select Docs, then Forms, here we can see forms that are associated to several different cases as opposed to just one case. So you've got the option to save a few forms at once to different case files at once as well. And of course, preview some forms and download those forms as PDFs. So back over to our presentation. So in case you don't have access to forms, it's really simple process to get your firm signed up. just reach out to me and I can sort this out for you. You'll then get charged £10 plus VAT per active user per month. You'll only get charged if you or members of your firm make changes to a form within a calendar month. It's easy to use this service, and only when it's easy to use the service when you need to as well. So, for example, if 3 of you were to use forms in May, you'd be charged £30 plus VAT. If 6 people were then to use forms in June, you'd be charged a £60 plus VAT. But if no one uses forms in July, then you won't be charged in July. The only caveat to that is that the Law Society royalty fees are a one annual payment for the forms that you need to use for that. So before I move on to our next slide, I can see that we've actually had a few questions. So Paul, I'm just wondering if you're able to see some of these questions and provide the answers to those. For anyone who has asked questions that have been unanswered in the demo so far, those questions will be answered to you via email from myself, or maybe in more detail from an email from Paul later on in the demonstration.
So actually, I can't see any questions as it stands at the moment. I don't know if you want to read them out, and myself and Archie will be able to answer them for you.
Of course. So here is the question. So this is from Sharon. She is like to advise that she was having problems with the TA bundle, which she has reported to our support, and our tech team will give her a call regarding that. She is then added when she prepares a TA6 bundle, i.e. she'll do a TA6 and then add TA7/TA10 form to the bundle. When she saves the forms from the Forms tab into Documents, it saves the form with the correct name, i.e. TA10, but it's actually the PIF form or TA7, but it is the PIF form.
Okay, that sounds to me, Archie, you may want to butt in, but this does sound a little bit like a Quill saving question rather than the forms piece. Don't know, you agree, Archie, on that one?
Yeah, thank you. I'm now unmuted. Yes, I think that what would be useful is to have the form ID from Sharon, and we'll take a look at how that crosses over into Quill forms, and we'll take that offline because it's a specific question in this sense. But the principle of a TA bundle is that you can think of it as a parent and child relationship. The TA6 is the parent, and the TA10 and 7 and 13 and all the rest of it are the children. And you can save the whole bundle. You enter information on one of them and you use common field names, which transfers common data between the forms across all of the forms, which make up part of the bundle. And it doesn't matter whether it's IHT or whether it's TA or an LPA, then you enter the information once and you won't need to enter it again. So that is what a bundle does, and you should be able to edit it and save it all into Quill forms and be able to access that from within Quill forms, basically to carry on editing or to get to the finished product. But for Sharon in particular, Becky will grab a form ID, and we'll look at that one in particular.
Thanks, Archie. So if anyone has any further questions as well, I'll present my email address further on in the next slide, and please don't hesitate to email me any questions that you do have. So as we mentioned at the beginning, you will receive a follow-up email with a recording of this webinar. If you have any questions, as I've just mentioned, or you're interested in signing up to forms, then please feel free to reach out to myself. My email address is up on the screen. It's rebecca.thomas@quill.co.uk. And thank you very much, everyone, for your time on the webinar today. So once again, thank you for attending our webinar today. I hope you've seen the benefits of Quill forms, especially as we move towards a working from home culture. I'll bring up that slide again with my email address on, should anyone like to take note of that. And again, if you'd like to sign up to forms, do send myself an email, or if you have any questions, then please feel free to send them over. I'm happy to go over the charge and structure again with anyone, or if you'd like a list of forms available, we do have that available too.